Every car loses value as soon as you drive it away from the dealership. This is called depreciation. It's just something you have to deal with if you buy a new car. But it's an especially big problem with some new electric cars. So what can you do to avoid it?
Well, carwow has partnered with CAP HPI by Solera, the vehicle solutions specialist, to find out what's going on. CAP HPI data tracks used car values for all new models sold in the UK.
I've used this to see how used car values have changed over the last 12 months. Specifically, how much the values of second-hand electric cars are dropping. To do this, I've got a list of every mainstream car on sale today, and I've looked at the current trade-in value of a clean one-year-old car with 10,000 miles on the clock. Then I've looked at how much you'd have got for trading in a similar one-year-old car with the same mileage at this same time, but in 2023, 12 months ago. And now I can reveal the 10 electric cars that have suffered the biggest drop in their value over the last year. I'll also reveal how these compare to similar petrol and diesel cars over the same period, so you know which cars to buy and which ones to avoid. I'm Matt Watson, you're watching CarWow. The Porsche Taycan has been in the news a lot recently because people have discovered how shocking the depreciation is on it. I found a 2023 Porsche Taycan Turbo S for sale through Porsche's approved used program for just £112,900. This car is only a year old and it only has 20 miles on it. However, it cost around £150,000 when it was new without options. That means depreciation has cost the owner about £1,800 for each single mile they drove. It's insane! But this new CAP data shows that depreciation isn't a new problem for cars like the Porsche Taycan. On average, the trade-in value of a one-year-old Porsche Taycan with 10,000 miles has dropped by £15,806 since 2023. That's a 20% drop in just 12 months. That sounds like a lot, but it's nothing compared to some other cars on my top 10 list. These electric cars have seen their second-hand values drop by much more than the Porsche Taycan in percentage terms. So let's get started. The first car on my list is the Kia EV6. If you traded in a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles last year, you get over £44,500 on average according to CAP's data. However, if you look at a 12-month-old car with the same mileage today, the data shows it's worth less than £33,000. That's a drop of 26.7% on what you'd have got for a one-year-old 10,000 mile Kia EV6 if you traded it in 12 months ago compared to if you trade it in today. However, this is just the start. In 9th place on the list is the Cupra Born. The trade-in value of a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles has dropped by 26.8% in the last year, from over £31,000 to less than £23,000. So essentially the same car with the same age and mileage is worth a whole chunk less than you'd have got for it 12 months ago. Now interestingly, the change in value of a one-year-old Cupra Born today compared to 12 months ago is even greater than the 24.1% drop in Volkswagen ID3 values, despite both cars sharing many basic components. But how does the used value of a Cupra Born compared to a petrol diesel car? Well, the average trade-in value of a used Cupra Leon hybrid, which is a similar size to the Born, only dropped by 16.4% in the same period. So that car, if you traded it in a year ago and it was a year old at the time that you traded it in and it had 10,000 miles on the clock, would have got you £29,000 in the trade-in value. However, if you trade in a one-year-old 10,000 mile Cupra Leon hybrid today, you'll get £24,200 for it. Meanwhile, the used value of just a purely petrol version dropped from around £27,000 to just over £23,400. So that's a drop of just 13.5%. So it seems that electrification isn't so good when it comes to used values and trade-ins. Next up is the Audi e-tron GT. This is interesting because this car's second-hand values have dropped more than the Porsche Taycan, even though they're basically the same underneath. A one-year-old e-tron GT with 10,000 miles is worth 27% less than the same car would have been last year. That's a drop in trade-in value from over £45,000 to just over £33,000. For comparison, the trade-in value of an Audi A7 diesel has only dropped by 2.7% over the same time, and a petrol version has only dropped by 1.7%. Now I know the A7 isn't a direct competitor to the GT, but they're similar kind of cars, aren't they? And on the petrol car, the decrease in value is really less than £1,000 for each car, which is nothing. In 7th place on the list is the Mercedes EQC and Renault Megane E-Tech. The second-hand value of both these cars dropped by 27.4% in the last 12 months. In terms of actual cash, this means the average trade-in value of a one-year-old Mercedes EQC with 10,000 miles on the clock has fallen from just over £45,000 a year ago to less than £33,000 today. And the value of a similar age Renault with the same amount of miles dropped from £29,500 last year compared to just £21,500 today. The Oracat is one of the first Chinese cars you've been able to buy in the UK, but it doesn't seem to have particularly stable values on the second-hand market. The average trade-in value of a used Oracat has dropped by £7,000 on average since 2023. This means you can expect to get £17,200 if you trade in a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles on the clock today. That's down 28.9% compared with the same time last year. Back then, you would have been offered an average of £24,200 for a 10,000 mile car that's 1 year old. Next up on this list is the Mercedes EQB. Back in 2023, a clean one-year-old car with 10,000 miles was worth around £44,700 if you traded it in with a dealer. But now, a year-old car with the same miles is only worth £31,000. That's a drop of 30.7%. The EQB is basically a Mercedes GLB underneath. So how does the EQB compare with the GLB in terms of second-hand prices? Well, a diesel GLB has dropped in value by 12.1% compared to the same time last year, from over £33,600 to around £29,600. And petrol versions of the GLB fared even better. Trading in a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles will net you approximately £29,500 today, compared with around £33,500 a year ago. That's a drop of just 11.8%. But what about Mercedes electric cars that aren't based on existing models with internal combustion engines? Well, the trade-in value of a one-year-old Mercedes EQS with 10,000 miles has gone from almost £91,500 on average in 2023 to just £70,200 this year. That's a drop of 23.3%. You'd have been better off if you went for a Mercedes S-Class. The trade-in value of these petrol and diesel-powered limos have dropped by just 7% and 3% respectively in the last 12 months, comparing like with like. Interestingly, the trade-in values of hybrid versions of the S-Class have actually gone up by 2.5% in the same period, from almost £92,000 in 2023 to now being worth £94,200 for a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles on the clock. Before we go on to the next car, I want to tell you about some BMW limousines, because their second-hand values seem to be even more stable than the Mercedes. The trade-in value of a one-year-old BMW i7 with 10,000 miles has dropped only by about £7,400 in the last year, which works out to about 7.7%, whereas the trade-in value of a similar 7 Series hybrid has actually gone up by 5.1% since 2023. That's an increase of almost £4,000 from £77,600 to over £81,500 if you trade in a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles on the clock today. You can't say the same for the electric BMW i4 though. The trade-in value of a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles has dropped by 14.1% in the last year. That works out to the car today being worth about £6,330 less than it would have been a year ago. It's not so bad for the petrol and diesel powered 4 Series though. Even though the Grand Coupe versions use the same chassis, body and interior as the electric i4, their values have stayed much more stable. A comparable used petrol 4 Series Grand Coupe has only dropped in value by 2.3% or £850 since 2023. And values of diesel cars have only dropped by 1.4% or £510 when you're comparing a one-year-old car with 10,000 miles in 2023 compared with the same car in 2024. more. In fourth place on this list is the Volvo C40. If you went to trade in one of these coupe-styled SUVs last year with 10,000 miles on the clock and 1 year old, it'd be worth just over £42,700 on average. Today, a similar 1 year old car with the same mileage is worth less than £30,000 to a dealer. That's a 31% drop over 12 months. Weirdly, the electric Volvo XC40, which uses most of the same parts as the C40, has only dropped in value by 18.6% over the same period. And internal combustion engine cars have fared even better. The hybrid XC40 dropped by just 15.5%, and the value of petrol cars dipped by just 9%. The next car on this list, and in third place, is the Toyota BZ4X. A year ago, back in 2023, a year-old car with 10,000 miles on the clock was worth just over £41,000 if you traded it in. However, today, the used value of a 1 year old BZ4X with 10,000 miles on the clock is just £28,000. That means those cars are fetching 32% less money than they were last year. Subaru and Lexus also make versions of the BZ4X, the Solterra and the RZ. And weirdly, both these cars have more stable second-hand values. Maybe it's to do with their availability. Over the last year, the trade-in values of the Subaru Solterra have dropped by 23.3% from almost £42,500 to just over £32,500. And the Lexus has dropped by 21.4% from almost £54,000 to just over £42,300 when comparing a similar 1 year old car with 10,000 miles on the clock. However, it's not all good news for Lexus, because the second place car on this list is the Lexus UX. A 1 year old UX with 10,000 miles was worth almost £31,300 if you traded it in a year ago. Trade in a similar car, 1 year old, 10,000 miles on the clock today, and its value is just £21,300. That's a 32.1% drop. That drop looks even more serious when you compare it with the standard hybrid Lexus UX. A 1 year old used hybrid UX with 10,000 miles on the clock today is worth just over £23,100 if you trade it in. That's only 13.6% less than a comparable car was worth this time last year. Now we come to the dubious #1 spot on this list, and the electric car that has seen the biggest drop in used values over the last year is the Citroën C4X. Now, 12 months ago, you'd have got £25,890 for a 1 year old car with 10,000 miles on the clock. Now, though, that value has dropped to just £17,458 for a similar 1 year old car with 10,000 miles. That's £8,433 less, and a drop of 32.6%. Now, electric versions of the C4 hatchback have also dropped over the last year, although by just £4,356, which works out at 23.7%. It turns out that petrol and diesel-powered versions of this car remain much more stable in terms of their second-hand trade-in values, as is the case with most cars on this list. The value of a petrol engine C4 dropped by just over £3,600, which is a fall of 19.7%, and the diesel dropped by just over £2,200, or 12% on average. Generally, the value of any 1 year old 10,000 mile car today is less than it was a year ago. Part of the reason is the supply issues in 2023, bumping up used car prices back then, but now they are normalising. In a few cases, some 1 year old 10,000 mile models fetch more than they did a year ago, but with the exception of the electric Genesis GV70, none of these cars are actually EVs. A 1 year old 10,000 mile version of that Genesis is worth 0.8% more than the similar car was a year ago. However, the petrol and diesel versions of that Genesis have actually gone up by 0.9%, and that sums up the market as a whole. EVs have just performed worse than internal combustion engine cars. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, it really helps us out. If you click on the video windows, you can watch some more videos, and if you click on the CarWow logo, you can go to CarWow to see how much money you can save on your next car. Thanks for watching.